Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the latest edition of Wannabe Wednesdays. A bit of a different edition here in that, thanks to the wonders of global telecommunications, I am broadcasting directly from Shanghai, where MDL just wrapped up a few days ago. And, well, how's it going, Shrew?
It's really good to be back. Finally got the landline through from Shanghai to Ottawa, and it's just good to have another Wannabe Wednesday back in the books.
Yeah, I'm certainly glad that we're able to do this and keep this going. Despite the great distance, I was a little bit worried. So, Mars TV, the MDL just wrapped up, which is going to be pretty much the last major tournament before the Shanghai Major at the end of this month, of course. And this, in many senses, was more or less a mini major, like a good preview, because I'm pretty sure every single team in this field is going to be at that major, with the exception of, I believe, Mineski. Is that right?
I think you're actually right, since Team Spirit did really well in I think the Open qualifier, if I'm not wrong. Yeah, I think they went
they were one of the two. I think they're one of the two teams with, what was it, Liquid, who qualified from Europe for the major. So this was so 9 out of 10 teams in this field are going to be at the major. So it's a nice preview, and then we also got to see a lot of things. Like OG, who we hadn't seen since the Summit 4, we got to see them play on this patch, and they basically ran all the way, to the winter bracket final. So a lot of strong performances and a lot to break down as we look forward to this episode. So things to open up with, Shrew. Any things that you noticed that really stuck out to you, or in terms of maybe heroes or numbers or anything like that?
Honestly, it just felt like a super long time since we had like Vici, EG, and like I guess you can kind of still say Secret because they did kind of start off the post TI5 season as one of the favorites, but for some reason it just feels like it's been a long time since we've seen Vici, EG, and then you throw OG into that mix. I think the last name in the hat that needs to be thrown in is probably CDEC. If CDEC showed up to the party with LGD and eHome as well, this would have been like why do you even need to see Shanghai Major? This is pretty much the Shanghai Major, right? If that was the case. But it was just like super stacked teams. And I think Nahaz mentioned that it was like one of the best fields of teams in terms of like ELO rating of like almost all time in terms of how competitive the groups were. So you had like teams like Complexity and Team Spirit which were a little bit more of like unknown quantities relative to the really big names. You just didn't really know how they maybe might stack up. You would expect them to maybe not be able to hang, but like it would probably be a pleasant surprise if they did, right? And that was the case, I'd say, in the group stages. Also, you had like teams like Newbie that went through a recent change in terms of swapping in Tron, right, to play support from IG. And so you didn't really know how they were going to show up, so it was kind of cool. And of course, you had OG, who had just taken a super long break from really big tournament play, like you mentioned. They basically didn't show up for 2 of the major international tournaments, those 2 being WCA, which was in China, and also Star Ladder, which was in some place in Eastern Europe. I can't remember. It's escaping me right now. I can't remember. And yeah, so that was really cool to see. Just like high-ass tier Dota, and it's like it's funny because we kept kind of saying like after the patch, it was like, we'll wait for another tournament to kind of get the idea of what the patch is going to be like. Let's wait for the big teams to play the patch, and then we get this big tournament, and it's like, wait, there's no more tournaments till the major. So it's like we kind of finally get a glimpse of like maybe something we would consider a mature understanding of the patch. But as it kind of turned out, I feel like teams were still kind of adapting and kind of molding their own understandings of the meta or play style throughout the tournament. So yeah.
Yeah, I think you saw a lot of push, obviously, like teams favoring that early on, but you saw other things work as well. So this patch getting rounded out a bit more. It's a nice tune-up, I guess, for the major. So this time, I guess I had the kind of unique perspective of being here on the ground for the tournament, where I reprised my usual role as kind of a translate, go-between, and help communication and stuff. And, it was... Well, I'm sure a lot has been said already in the Western world about the tournament, and a lot more still will be said. In fact, I hope to get Complexity's manager, Kyle Beef Bautista, on the show with us, and we can talk about both this event and Heroes of New Earth, because of how influential, actually, in the Chinese note pointed this out too, how influential Heroes of New Earth seems to have been on the Dota scene in terms of the top pros, the players, the bad blood between them.
Oh, really?
Between some of them, and I don't know if he'll want to talk about that, but there's a lot of stuff going on, a lot of strategies being brought over. Like one of the Chinese pointed out that tiny strategy that OG used with the Meepo, like with the tiny getting like huge, not just like Wisp Tiny, obviously, which we've seen in Dota, but like his exact build with like butterfly and stuff. He said that was something that they'd seen from Han. So it's really interesting when the Chinese talk about like the Dota and the strategy and stuff. They get really, really precise and detailed. They bring a lot of history into it. So, and then with Heroes of New Earth, its influence on this game, a lot of the top pros right now are people who first made a name for themselves over in that game, and that's kind of what Swindles is trying to do also here in Dota with Complexity. So we'll get to that, but just in terms of, I guess, to kind of just paint the scene, maybe the tournament was held not in Shanghai, but in the city called Wuxi, which was about a couple hours away by car or by rail, and it's it's a nice, like, small, quaint, clean city, I suppose. It's like growing and stuff. Okay. It's not actually like a horrible, disgusting
village,
like anything like that.
Fish market.
It's not,
yeah,
yeah, exactly. So it wasn't that bad, but like the venue, there were some oddities about it, and obviously I can't talk about or don't know much of the process in terms of deciding where to hold the tournaments and such, but it had this very homely feel to things. I don't think homely is the right word, but it's like it's in the mall, so people just in the shop, like people just going around like shopping, like going about their business, can come and like watch Dota, and it's like in the middle of the mall basically where it's set up. I mean, there's some things that like I want to say only in China, but it's not. It's just not like the same Western polish in terms of like the place was like very dimly lit, like randomly. Like there were guards posted everywhere to keep people from like going into the area without like passes or whatever special tickets. But then sometimes like people get in anyway, and they like maybe bother the players and stuff like that. And I think the main thing actually to keep in mind for this tournament, not only are you talking about Western teams traveling very far away to play in it, but there was also a case of the plague going around where just about, I want to say, it was like a hospital ward up there at some point. Just about everybody had masks on. Like 50% of the people at least had masks on, and like a good chunk of them had either were sick or had gotten sick at some point. And we'll get to that, but it was pretty bad. I heard that Crit was planning to go on some kind of post-graduation vacation with his friends to in Southeast Asia. And he was so sick that he had to immediately fly back to, I think it was Denmark after the tournament or something like that, because this plague was just destroying people.
Wow. Because I did catch a glimpse of Sumail with like one of those like gas masks. Like I think it was like just walking around the event. Because it's an indoor event, so you would assume that you don't need a gas mask for like smog indoors. And I was just like, oh, it's just Sumail trying to start up another like headpiece accessory thing for him in terms of like the neck pillow, and now it's like the Chinese gas mask. But I guess it's just literally for protect himself from the plague or SARS or whatever was spreading around, right?
Yeah, at some point the Mars crew did pretty much what they could. At some point we decided to just buy masks for every single team, and then that's when like everyone started wearing them, whether they were sick or not. Some people had custom masks. Like Arteezy's looked really cool. He looked like a straight up pirate, basically. He had like this like New York mask. Basically, I don't know. It just looked like something out of like what's the show called? I'm missing it. Like one of those animes, the pirate one with Luffy, One Piece or whatever it is.
Yeah, sure.
It looked pretty cool, but people were sick, and like in some cases, I think for Team Spirit, Always Want to Fly was like he wasn't even able to play one of the last matches, and according to the rules, like you either have to then play with the stand-in who was on site but not participating in the tournament, or you had to like forfeit. So like that guy was like asleep between games. And like they had to wake him up just as the game was starting,
trying to recover and stuff.
So hard to recover, yeah.
Oh my god!
It's like in the draft, he would still be asleep, and then once the game started, he was there. So it's pretty crazy.
Yeah, like my impression of like Western players, because like you have like North American players coming across, and you also have these like European players, right? Whatever encompasses the like cross-continental travel and for cross-continental teams, right? It's like kind of unnerving enough and unsettling enough to have to go through all these time zone shifts, changes in culture and, climate, and then, food and whatnot, and hygiene and like the washrooms. By the way, I can speak kind of loosely about this. Well, I feel like I can speak kind of loosely about this because I have been to China. I'm Chinese. I have of Chinese descent, so I know firsthand, and I can kind of play around with this. So don't feel offended, any Chinese listeners. I'm one of you, and so is Jack. But anyways, back to the point. We know those washrooms firsthand. Yeah, like you expect to show up in one of those kind of giant sports arenas, right? That's been like refurbished to handle like an esport venue, probably, right? That's probably the safest assumption, right? But if you show up to this like cramped mall, the production's a little bit shoddy. No one speaks your language. All the food looks a little bit strange. Everything's not really clean. Everyone's getting sick. The air quality is not great to begin with. But it being held outside of Shanghai seems to be actually to that's benefit, right, Jack, I'd assume? Because you don't really have those big smog clouds crawling out to the small suburbs like a couple hours away. I don't know. Like, I actually have no clue. One would assume it wouldn't be as big of a problem, right? But
everyone who was actually who actually worked with Mars TV in Shanghai told me that the air there is relatively clean, but like compared to Shanghai, I mean, so far I haven't noticed anything really bad in Shanghai. It's like either visibly or in terms of breathing it in. But I heard that it gets worse during the months that it's warm. So I think
different different seasons, right?
Yeah, so it wasn't too bad in terms of that. But right, like you talked about, there's it's kind of unavoidable, but there's a kind of lack of polish to some things. Like, for example, something like the bath would, even though it's the middle of winter, like you wouldn't have hot water there to like wash your hands with after using. Like those things are like, they're not huge, but they're like kind of basic quality of life type of things that are missing from like some of these like venues and places. Then you also had this other problem, which actually was a much larger problem, where the rooms were in this. It was like a soundproof studio. It was like this whole venue was in like a studio type of building. It was a mall, but like, it was in a studio.
Like some kind of TV studio or something, like a production company?
Yeah, it was a production company. Like, that's where the practice rooms were, and that's where the players play the group stages as well.
All right.
There's only one like main stage game at a time. So because of that, the building was like centrally heated, so or rather centrally air conditioned. So it would be either set to heat or cold, and obviously since it's winter, it'd be set to heat. So what ended up happening was that the air conditioner in each room, because of the central AC, could only be set to varying degrees of heat. So normally that would be okay, but in this case, when you have a small room with like 5 players in there and their computers, it got incredibly hot, incredibly fast, and like you could see players were playing with their like trying to wear as little as possible. They're like sweat dripping down their backs and stuff, and like the computers would be overheating, and people would just look like they're about to pass out from the heat, like in the middle of winter. And like the rest of the hall was like cold, and like people had to like a sudden change in temperature since we walked out into the hallway, because the rooms were like sweltering hot because of the AC being like not changeable to cold. Like, it's just weird things like that. Like those things just I mean, again, it's hard to say whose fault it is or whatever, but it's just the venue, and like there's these little inconveniences, things that add up, and they affect the players for sure.
Physical demands of esports right there, Who says this isn't like these guys aren't athletes, right? Broken air conditioning systems and like no cold water or no hot water in the washrooms. That's pretty messed up. But yeah, like I was just the whole thing is just, if Eternal Envy is gonna write blog posts about like non-adjustable, gaming chairs in the booths, or like sound leak coming through sound booths, like to imagine, some of these players coming in and being kind of caught off guard by these below average kind of conditions is, it could have been a good thing. And I'm sure if Envy wanted to, he could go to town on this on another forum blog post thing, but it seems that he's kind of quieted down.
Well, I wouldn't be surprised if he does. Just having talked to him at the event, he is one of the people who was under the weather and like very sick as well. And I wouldn't be surprised if a blog is forthcoming. I'm sure he has plenty of stuff to talk about from this event. So it was tough, and then the food thing. There's like I feel like at an international event, someone's always going to be unhappy about it. They talk about how usually like, the Chinese obviously don't like food at Western events, and vice
Right.
versa. And then there was kind of a joke about Frankfurt, where it was like nobody liked the food in Frankfurt.
Not even in Frankfurt.
Um, they had a lot of turkey and stuff, but it was so at this time, they just tried to find solutions for the Western teams, which was try to get them some. If there's no McDonald's, but they tried to get them some KFC. I think that's what EG had for most of their time there. And then there's like a pizza place downstairs. There's like
Yeah.
random Western food in China now, but a lot of it is like pretty bad.
Ugh.
Like understandably because it's like suited to Chinese tastes. So
Right.
yeah, they're just trying to make them feel comfortable. Just all these other things to deal with that you kind of sort out once the event begins.
Yeah, that kind of brings me back to last year's TI. I think like the last like day of TI, one of the last like days I was staying at the city, I like went out a couple minutes away from downtown center to like like 20 minutes away to like the Chinatown of Seattle, which wasn't that big of a of a community, I guess, just from what I had caught a glimpse of. But I ended up bumping into like how ordering Chinese food or like waiting for a table. I was like, oh crap. You're how?
Nice.
You're.
Nice.
It was really funny. I was like, "Wait, you're shorter than I expected." But he was like, wearing like really elaborate like Gucci shoes and like some really expensive
Yeah,
clothing. I was like, yeah, that's how.
uh,
That's how.
yeah, Hal's pretty cool. He's always got a big grin.
Yeah,
He's like
he's a nice guy.
a lot of the players are a little bit more distant, but
Mhm.
Hal's actually very friendly most of the time, and he's like they have a nickname for him that's like kind of emphasizes that he's like a little bit like metrosexual because he dresses
Wow.
polished and stuff. So
Okay,
Chinese kind
jeez.
of poke fun at him a little bit for that, but yeah, he's cool. He gave me like we're going up the escalator, and he gave me like this kind of like Buddha belly rub for good luck or something on the way
Whoa.
up.
Jack, dude, sign me up, dude. Holy crap. I would never wash that belly. How touch that belly? I would farm with that belly, dude.
Yeah, they all have different personalities. As some come out and some are a lot more reserved. But
Mhm.
yeah, as far as the food, I mean, I think they seem to think that it was okay. I was in like the LGD one of the LGD matches when they brought in like the food from a local place that had the partnership obviously with the event, and they were like, yeah, it's okay, we can take it. So
Cool.
at least the Chinese teams were happy in that respect.
Yeah, of course, right? Well, now that we've got like everything outside of Dota kind of covered for this tournament, we should probably get on to the action, huh?
Yeah, well, not everything, but just kind of a cliffhanger. We'll leave the rest hopefully for Mr. Bautista for Beef himself. Maybe
Yeah,
next.
yeah. Seems like he'll
And
probably have some inside knowledge, right?
yes. Also, we have 5 days of Dota to break down, and so in the group stage, it looks like Mineski and Team Spirit, as we mentioned, the Team Spirit playing essentially with someone like incapacitated, had
Oh my God.
the groups and didn't qualify for the playoffs. And
Yeah.
I don't think Mineski won a single game this tournament, but Spirit did manage to take a match off Newbie.
Yeah, I'll be honest. I think I caught a glimpse of the Spirit newbie matches when I was waiting for, other games to start. But I don't think anyone had any great expectations for upsets. I mean, I guess Team Spirit would be one of the candidates, right, for some kind of upset, some kind of noise. Maybe you would expect them to do better than even Complexity because of how well they did in the European qualifiers. But as far now, since you told us like the whole always want to fly was about to die kind of status, it makes a lot more sense that their performance didn't represent maybe their potential. So
Yeah, I think he is one of several people. Well, actually, I'm not sure, but he might have gone to the hospital. I know several people did.
oh my.
Yeah, my counterpart translator went to the hospital, and I think Mally himself also went to the hospital. So people were not to harp on this anymore. People were quite sick, but it was again. This is a loaded field for them, so maybe not that much information. I think Spirit with Godblack, I believe, is captain. Like they're, I don't know how often they've played together, like online and such. So it's probably a good learning experience for them, even knowing that one of their players was like out of it, that they still had like fought pretty well in a lot of the games. And Mineski continues to get really valuable experience. They were at the Frankfurt Major as well, and they're getting to play like a lot. They were at Summit 4 too, so they're getting to play a lot of these like higher profile events at the very least. And think it's safe to say that they're probably not one of the stronger teams. But that's, I mean, if you're them and you're getting to play these like high profile competition, that's still probably good.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if they're always going to come second fiddle in the SCA region, that means that's going to be a lot of land trips, right? So it's eventually they're going to have to get better, right? They're going to continue to get better, and they're going to bring back what they know to the scene, and hopefully they can take another step forward, and maybe move towards the middle of the pack someday, soon.
Yeah. So for the early playoffs, Complexity were beaten by Evil Geniuses relatively early, and then eHome, the eventual champions, as everybody knows. I think that was the first time beating EG in this tournament. Maybe important of things to come. 2-1. So, any other thoughts? Not any other, but like, what are your thoughts on the early playoff rounds of this tournament?
I mean, I think they kind of happened to expectations. We like with eHome and EG facing off like right off at the upper bracket round one. Like it was going to be a close match no matter what, because the eventual standings of Group B, which had LGD, eHome, and Team Secret, and even Complexity, those four teams were in like a deadlock with the identical records by the end of the group stages, and so they had to play like a 4-team tiebreaker with like 8 extra or I guess technically 8 extra games or whatnot. And so it just clearly showed that these like the race was very, very tight. And EG also finished middle of the pack in their group, which was a little bit more like widespread. You had like Vici at the top of Group A, then OG, and then EG. But Vici actually had a numerous number of sweeps. I think 3 sweeps against the teams in that group. OG had 3 sweeps as well, actually. And EG was the team that was like either losing series or taking splits, right? And also I think they 2-0'd Team Spirit. But almost every team in that group did. So basically, EG they came into the tournament with pretty good expectations because of how well they've done in the recent tournaments. I think Star Ladder, they finished in the grand finals, right? When they got swept by Alliance, but that's still a pretty strong performance nevertheless. And with eHome, kind of we just figured that we're in for like a pretty close series. And it was pretty close. It was like 2-1, but the games were much closer than the series represents, like the series indicator. And yeah, basically they started off the tournament as you would expect, right at the bottom of the losers bracket after losing to eHome. And to be honest, EG just hasn't played that many games in this patch, and so when you give PPD the chance just to beat up on a couple of relatively weaker, talented teams and whatnot, and just to study the draft and kind of like just get a better sense of the, of that kind of like of that aspect of the game, it's usually to EG's strengths, and I think we saw that in like full force at Mars TV.
Yeah, and you brought up a point that I kind of want to talk about too. Is nobody really plays that many games on these patches anymore.
Yeah.
You mentioned this last time, right? Like a few years ago, you had the situation where everyone has to play in just about everything, and that's really no longer the case. Like Western teams especially can kind of pick and choose their spots a little bit. So if there's like a patch every 2 or 3 months, this kind of situation is going to become somewhat commonplace, where teams don't get to play that much, and like the Chinese teams do have an advantage, I feel, in that regard, because they do play more events. Generally speaking, like they participate in more domestic events, even if they're not international. So that definitely is to their favor. eHome was always a team that, from what we saw in Frankfurt, like has a lot of potential and a lot of talent, and I think they're starting to put it together as well. And you saw that certainly with their finish in this tournament, which we'll talk about. And then we saw some interesting hero usages in the early playoffs. Here we had the Earth Spirit mid being played by Weehaw, and we had some different builds that were maybe a little bit more pub star type, but really showcasing what that hero is capable of doing. And I mean, I'd always been really high on him, and by high I mean I dreaded playing against a good Earth Spirit player in pub, so I felt the hero was like, this is a hero that can do so much. Like the only thing he really cannot do is sustain right click. He can do everything else. He can get you out of position. He can save allies. He has stuns, silences. He has AoE damage. I mean, this guy can do anything.
Yeah, that hero was one of the most like I guess the most iconic heroes of this tournament, I would say, in terms of his prominence, in terms of the first ban stage, and if he ever managed to get it through into into the team's hands, you would always see a bunch of crazy highlights. Like Weehaw in particular, he was like super impressive on Earth Pyramid, because I honestly don't recall him playing that hero previous to this tournament. And I was like, oh, this is a Weehaw hero apparently, because the way that guy was fighting in team fights was like, it was really spectacular to watch, because we kind of have an idea of how the support Earth Spirit is sort of played. It's a little bit more of like a roaming type. He kind of sets up the ganks. Maybe in team fights he gets a couple of silences and stuns off on multiple targets. That's kind of his contribution. And in terms of like the Earth Spirit support build, it's like you sometimes see an urn. You usually see some kind of rush to eggs, right? I think that's generally what you have, and arcane boots. But with Weehaw's build, he didn't go for the eggs rush nearly as quickly. He would go like Blade Mail, Veil of Discord, Blink, BKB, and these are just all like straight utility items, right? Of course, with like treads and bottle, and so he's like a really beefy, in your face, like turn it on Blade Mail to like annoy you guys and just reflect damage, and dropping off his magnetize on multiple heroes. But just watching, like I was in a group Skype call with my friends watching a couple games late at night. Specifically Team Secret games, because we were like kind of all fanboying it up, and Weehaw was like just owning like team fights. There was one thing that one of my friends said that was like really impressive and kind of stuck out to me, and it was like, sometimes you get a grasp that like one player is tracking like a specific region of a fight, and he's like almost taking control of it. And when you take a player like Weehaw, who's so highly skilled, and give him a hero that can just do so much, he can just like completely take over this one area of the fight. But it seemed like Weehaw was taking over like the entire fight, like slamming stuns on like heroes like multiple screens away, and like landing, like canceling. I think there's one highlight on like a Noob from UA's YouTube channel where he like cancels two TPs like almost in like the fog of war, and he's like silencing people, and it was just like, you guys should probably check out those highlight reels of Weehaw Spirit, because that was like, okay, this hero is totally broken. And I think for the rest of the tournament, it was just like, okay, let's just ban that as soon as possible. And it's pretty much what all the drafters did.
Yeah, the thing that's always bothered me about that hero is that he does all of those things on a strength body, which is just obscene, because that's like the only like, what else does he need but HP? So if you start building it like a core, and you have items like Blade Mail, BKB, where usually the response to him, it feels like you have to kill him, right? Because otherwise he keeps putting down the rocks like through the ult, or he just keeps coming back and forth and just doing stuff. But if you can't even kill him anymore, or if it costs you way too much to try and kill him, that hero just becomes an absolute nightmare. So I always thought there was a problem with that. I didn't understand why he was a strength body, because I'm pretty sure there's no other non-int body that even comes close to the utility that he has, and like it's like if you had like Rubik on like a strength body or something, and like he did the same thing but he was just tanky. Like, that wouldn't make any sense. I wouldn't understand why they would do that. So not to complain about the balance of it, but I kind of don't understand why that hero is given. Like, some heroes are just given so much, and some heroes are just like outright, as they say, like potatoes. They do like one very specific thing decently, you know what I mean? Versus someone who just like is designed to do everything,
to break the game. It's been so long since Earth Spirit was actually like brought into Dota 2 client, and it took so long for him to make it to the actual competitive scene, finally approved in captain's mode. And then the second he's in there, it's like, this is so broken. And they have, like, that's the thing. Like, you mentioned early on in this podcast that Mars TV is sort of like the last major tournament before the next major. Last premier tournament before the next major, not to confuse you guys. There is no chance that hero slips through the cracks without some kind of change to his, some kind of balance change, because I don't know if it's going to be it's definitely not going to be one of those comprehensive patch logs where we see a big list of changes. It's going to come in the form probably of one of those, like, you see it on like a Steam, that Steam blue-black background, and it's just a list of hero changes. That hero's going to take something. They have to take something away from it, because it's still kind of messed up how much that hero can do, basically. And this tournament
this was after showcase. They nerfed him to bring him into captain.
Exactly.
So it's
messed.
I don't know. And yeah, if you look at, we talked about this, but all the heroes that have been buffed this patch, Lone Druid had a huge impact in this tournament as well.
Yeah,
Just about
absolutely.
everybody. You didn't see as much Death Prophet, I guess, or Death Prophet wasn't as prominent, but you would still see like Invoker a decent amount. Like that hero has so much damage. Like he has 200 right click damage basically with 3 fire orbs and like phase boots at some point. Like
And
once
like
he's got
Alacrity or
so
something.
yeah,
Yeah.
all of his spells are nearly ultimate tier quality spells, and he has obscene right click. Like he right clicks you harder than just about anybody, even when he's not an attack build, and he just about never is an attack build. Nobody actually builds him like an attack hero, at least professionally, But he still right clicks super hard. And I don't know.
Yeah.
They're just things that need to. They change his attack speed, but it kind of doesn't matter. Like you have that kind of attack range, you hit somebody for like 150 damage. Like you're talking about like a couple levels into the game. Like that's kind of absurd. But
I mean, we can just go straight into talking about Invoker because you probably brought up the next most relevant hero in terms of this like tournament meta because it's felt like if you didn't have a miracle, sorry, I jumped the gun a bit. If you don't have an Invoker player who can probably go on the par of like say Miracle, if you don't have a Sumail on hand or someone who's just that experienced or that talented on that hero, you were left in the dark because Invoker was another like one of the most played heroes in the tournament, I think, right up there with in terms of pick ban rate with like Earth Spirit because I mean the synergy again you talked about Lone Druid, that hero again had like a huge impact on this tournament, and when you talk about Invoker and Lone Druid on the same team being able to give Alacrity to the bear, like I don't know if you caught a glimpse of that, Jack, on the like tournament main stage screens, but that stuff is broken as hell because that bear just goes like you don't even see like the animation how fast it's attacking. I think eHome was running this thing where like Lan M went Legion Commander, and they had Invoker as well, Alacrity, and what is it like press the attack or something. That bear was like glitching out of the friggin' client. It was like melting the tower so fast. I was like, okay, this is just effed up because that was sort of like and it's not like a rock paper scissors situation. It's just like you have a crap load of first pick material, and so much of it is just so strong, like so strong synergistically, right? Like Lone Druid and Invoker, and I mean, if you throw it like an Earth Spirit into the mix, and then you're talking about how Bat Rider was extremely popular in this tournament as well. It was just very like a lethal toolkit I felt for drafters, and I mean, we can just go straight to the point. Like eHome just figured out what worked for them just the best in terms of playstyle and matching like their players, and also just understanding how to play with that kind of Russian roulette of like the draft screen because there's just so many strong heroes right now. That's just my impression of the meta.
yeah, I agree. You talk about heroes that we hadn't seen in a while, like someone like Morphling, who is by far the most escapey of like as any carry that, as far as I can tell, and like most heroes in general. Like nobody really has the escapability of that hero. So, in terms of split pushing, in terms of farming, in terms of getting in and out of fights, but he's a carry with burst, sustain, and escape. I mean that's a pretty good that's a pretty lethal trifecta there for any kind of hero because usually someone's not able to do one of the above as well as he is. And then when you talk about these kind of like set piece battles that maybe a team with a push strategy wants to do, like yeah, you have a bear up front and stuff behind him or whatever is buffing him. If you try to kill the bear, you can get feared on a very short cooldown, or you have to fight into a bottleneck. So, I mean, it's nice to see some of these heroes back. I can't complain about seeing a hero as versatile as Invoker, but also, it also feels like the meta is starting to stabilize a little bit because of how much stronger some of these other heroes are compared to like I don't know, just like pick anybody and just like how are they even in the same game as some of these heroes.
Yeah, it was just insane. Like, it's something about this meta and this current like tournament scene. I just get the impression that it matters so much what kind of like how comfortable the players are on the heroes because it's such a huge difference when you're talking about like a Bulldog Lone Druid and just any other European team. You can take your pick. Like say Team Liquid tries to run a Lone Druid strat, but they don't have Bulldog playing that Lone Druid. Like that Bulldog has like hundreds of games on this hero, and Alliance looks rejuvenated on this patch. Like it's messed up. Like these guys are like reanimated from the dead, talking about like undying level like reanimation, and it just has to do something with the player and hero, some kind of that in terms of that connection. Because again, we talk about Invoker, that hero didn't have like some kind of absurd win rate. It was split down the middle, I think, like maybe like 15-15, 18-18 in terms of win-loss in this tournament. That's not that big of a deal. But when you talk about like how did OG make it all the way to, the last 3 teams on the field? Like Miracle Invoker was absurd. Like it was absolutely insane what that guy was doing. Like I was talking to you about again, like the Wii effect that we were talking about on the call. It's like, yo, this guy is taking control of the freaking fight. Miracle was like taking control of like sections of the game. It was like, okay, no one's doing anything unless Miracle like approves of it or lets it happen. It was crazy. And when you were talking about just that hero in particular, it's like you talk about a hero that has so much utility, can be adapted to so many game situations in terms of item build, in terms of skill build. Is it a Quas Wex? Is it a Quas Exort? Is it going to be a farming type of Invoker with like pushing threat? Is it going to be like a tempo controller with like Orchid and throwing tornadoes and EMPs all over the place? You really don't know. And then when you talk about someone who's just so highly skilled in terms of raw talent as like Miracle, and even you have to still bring in like into the conversation Sumail, because he played a lot of damn good Invoker in this tournament to bring EG back to the grand finals. Like it's just a different beast entirely. You know what I mean? Like you have to have these players who can handle these heroes, and more and more is just like if you don't have those special combinations, you kind of are left in the dark. And like I have to admit, like I was rooting for Team Secret to have some kind of signs of life after like their kind of recent slump, but they kind of feel awkward, like, and kind of left out of place in this meta, because you have like Misery trying to play some Lone Druid as well, but I don't really take him as a Lone Druid player per se, and they look kind of awkward trying to run these strats that other teams have been just like owning with. So, and they had a very like disappointing finish as a result.
Yeah, just a quick recap maybe of some of these other Chinese teams. So, Vici came out really strong in the group stage, and they've always had kind of the talent and the respect of most of the other teams as an elite team, but they ended up losing 2 straight series against, I guess it can't be said that it was an easy road for them. They lost to the 2 eventual like runner-up and champion, home AG, so that was unfortunate, and we'll see how this team is able to rebound from that, or if there are any kind of... I heard rumors that there was some internal stuff going on. I mean, when you lose, it always comes to the surface, but it's hard to say at this point because I don't think they've won a major tournament in a while. For LGD and Newbie, I think, they kind of performed according to expectations. Newbie, of course, with Chuan as their addition, they were able to fight through a very difficult qualifying bracket from the China qualifier, which did include CDEC among some other teams. So they ended up prevailing out of that to actually make it into this MDL. And I think they had a decent finish. Like their players, generally speaking, even other than Chuan, again, they seem pretty happy with whatever they achieve, and I don't think they have any real hang-ups about it. They seem very upbeat, generally speaking. And LGD, there was, depending on what perspective you have, there's some... ROTK took a lot of flack for some of the games because he's kind of developed like a reputation both East and West as like someone who's going to give first blood maybe in the off lane, or someone who's going to struggle a little bit. But in the sense of he against OG, I think the deciding game, he whiffed a couple of pretty big chronospheres, and that kind of like lost him that game. And he just took so much crap from the Chinese, and the Chinese are saying like, oh well, can't wait till Zhao 8 comes out of retirement to take the place.
Dude, I've been saying that since like November. I'm just going to put that out there. But anyways, go on.
Well, they're fully expected. They would be shocked if it didn't happen, but they're just like, oh, now's the time. Like, please replace ROTK with Zhao 8, and they can just become a contender again and all that stuff. So, hope that's not the case. He's still a very unique personality and like very vocal as like leader and all that stuff. And he says some like... He just has a very interesting way of saying things and talking about things that's very endearing. So that's cool. I hope that manages to stay together and they find their groove. And so beyond that, were there any other performances or team, performances that really struck you or that really stood out to you?
I do want to talk about RTK just a little bit because there's been times where that player just feels so fearsome. Like, Like at last year's TI when he was playing with eHome, right? If I'm not mistaken. Am I mistaken? Jack, remind me. He was on eHome, right?
I think right. He was with Lanham, right?
Right. Yeah. Right.
Right, because when they were on Big God, and then when they came out, they all went to different teams. Yeah, I'm pretty sure he was. Yeah.
Yeah. I remember when he was on that team, and like at TI, that guy was just on something else because he's just one of those like players that like his highs and his lows are just so. It's such a huge gap, right? Like it's like call it like high variance, call it whatever you will. It's just when RTK is on point and when he's like his leadership style is on point, you know, when he's making the calls or whatever it needs to get him kind of fired up, like he plays like so stellar. And when he's reading the game like that, it's just crazy because I just still remember highlights from TI where he's just, you know, some Darkseer just hiding in the trees, just playing the map, and just it was just crazy. Like he was just like reading like situations so well and like just playing one step ahead of the enemy team and setting up traps or whatever. But I saw some highlights from this tournament where like I think it was like it wasn't a highlight reel, it was like a clown reel or something. It was like ROTK feed fest or whatever, and he was like 0-8 or something, and effectively just ended the game because I think it was like he like die backed, TP'd and die backed. It was just like holy crap, RTK is just doesn't have this game, and I don't know if he's like one of those just emotional players because he is in terms of personality he's emotional, but in terms of his performance, if it's impacted by his emotions, it can be make or break for LGD, right? And that may have been the case, which was enough to kind of take them out of the contention for the final spots, because it felt like OG, eHome, and EG were just like we kind of expected them to just from the start of the tournament. That was my impression. It was like, okay, OG's playing freaking amazing, right? And eHome is just 2-0ing everyone, and they 2-0'd Vici, who was doing super well at the start of the tournament. And I was like, okay, is this Vici's like rebirth tournament? Like, holy crap, they're doing so well in their group. Never mind, eHome 2-0'd them. Okay. And then, of course, EG is playing so many games in the losers bracket. They're kind of tuning up. And you're like, is LGD going to make some noise here or not? And then after a couple RTK, you know, blunders and mishaps, it's like, well, guess not. And it became a three-team field in terms of my perspective.
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, we'll see how that goes. eHome, you know, we've said some things already, but it was a really proud moment, I think, for the home fans when they won. Like, there was obviously like the loudest cheers and stuff. We heard it. The commentator made sure to mention that this was the first major tournament that a Chinese team had won, I think, in over a year. And
wow.
Obviously, it was Old Chicken back in Frankfurt who made that comment about Chinese Dota is dead, and that's still how some people feel. But it's nice for them to finally take an event and take it convincingly on home soil. And you know, you saw, of course, on social media all the other stuff coming out with the gifs on about CTY and Sumail and you know all that stuff, because Sumail had done some talking after a pub game earlier where I think he beat like ZSMJ in like in July or something, and he was saying China easy or whatever. But
oh,
you know,
my God, are you serious?
That's just innate Dota culture. Like that's how people, you know, there's just some friendly trash talk. I don't think there's anything, you know, people take it too seriously or make too big of a deal out of it. Mm-hmm. I had heard actually that someone was trying to like report Sumail to like the government to try to prevent him from getting his visa next time for the major. I really hope that doesn't happen. Like that would just be absurd and like incredibly petty and stupid. Like whatever, it's some friendly trash talk. But anyway, so it's nice that eHome was able to do that. Some of the players were half jokingly saying that. So I think Artur and Envy both said that CTY had gotten everyone sick, and it was part of his like master plan to like for all his teammates to be immune, and then he just comes to the tournament because he was originally not going to come or something because he was sick. Instead, he shows up and like he starts recovering, and everybody else gets sick, including obviously Artur and Envy. So it was kind of like CTY's master plan. Everybody said, even the Chinese were joking about it. Paid off as winning dirty, I guess. But yeah, they looked really good, and obviously his like CTY's performances and like morphing and stuff, you know, were like super precise, and that's a team that the Chinese have played with. Like you see Siler do well with it too, since like way back in like the TI1, TI2 heyday. So that's something that is back in the meta and people are obviously loving. And yeah, so in terms of other teams, I mean, I guess, you know, obviously OG, they said this themselves in an interview, is, you know, they hadn't really played on this patch, so they're probably pretty happy that they
Yeah.
just came and like breezed their way through like the winner bracket until they met eHome. I mean, they went down. It was similar to Vici in that they went down in two quick series and like maybe somewhat convincing series. But I mean, again, most of their players were quite sick or quite under the weather, and it was still a really strong performance because I don't think anybody expected them to just like immediately pick up where they left off kind of after Frankfurt and just start steamrolling people. But that's basically what they did. Very, very convincing, very strong performances, and not a third place to be ashamed of by any means, even though the exit was relatively brief and abrupt.
Yeah, you're right. When I was watching a couple of the OG games, I think actually I was watching games between OG and Team Secret. I was like kind of flustered. I was like, okay, OG's playing so freaking well, and Miracle's like crushing, right? And I think one of my friends just piped up. He's like, is it still in contention that OG is not a good team? Like, these guys are good. Like, get used to this. Like, get used to like your dreams being shattered as a Team Secret fan, because these guys are gonna ruin it. Because yeah, they kind of had that one performance. I can't remember what tournament it was. The name escapes me. But they were like up against like Team Liquid, and Team Liquid beat them in the grand finals. I think it was like in Frankfurt. I can't recall at this point, but yeah, they had like one tournament like a little bit like underperformed, I guess you could say, as opposed like coming out of their major victory. But at this tournament, they looked like right back into the fold, and they finished roughly where they should kind of belong in my mind. Like situated in the top 3, maybe that series against eHome goes the other way another day, stuff like that. You can never say for certain, but yeah, very strong performance. Miracle still looks like he's doing something else that's not Dota. It's like just crazy watching that guy play. So yeah, still high expectations.
Yeah, I mean, they've already speculated that Miracle is a robot, based on what we've seen of his performances and like how he conducts himself. For example,
They wheel him out.
He probably is a Dota Terminator. I don't think there's any question about it.
Yeah. It's a cord behind his back, like coming out of his back of his shirt, and everyone's like, "Okay, holy crap, he really is a robot, huh?" That would be really intimidating.
Some of the funniest, yeah, that would be great if like
that would be so funny. Hook him up like a USB cord.
He's just like, yeah. What are you talking about, guys? It feels perfect in here. That would give it away.
Yeah.
It's funny because you see that meme that has like the 8,000 MMR and like Chinese. The Chinese kind of have that kind of respect for him too. They're just like, oh, it's the 8,000 MMR god. Just like look at him, there he is, something like that.
Yeah, I know. It's like you make the joke, but it's like there's so much truth in it, because like that's why the joke's kind of funny. It's like, okay, 8,000 matchmaking points, haha, but he's actually 8,000 matchmaking points. Feels legit as hell. So whatever.
Yeah, speaking of MMR, multiple players reported losing quite a bit here, and there's a conversation about this. It's just like there's a lot of it's pretty rough. The competition is rough here. The games are I actually haven't played a single game so far that was like a throw where like someone overtly just fed chickens or gave up on the game. All the games have been pretty contested. But it is hard. Like the people with their team fights and I mean, people show up to every fight and they're pretty good about it. So I can see why. Like obviously, I'm not relevant or anything, but like I also very quickly lost like 200-300 solo.
Holy crap!
Like games are hard. Their players are good, and nobody really like gives up on stuff. Everyone's like a huge counter-picking tryhard. So some of the players are talking about that too. They're like convening and discussing. Oh man, I dropped 200 MMR already. All that stuff. So just
armies of eternal envies, right? In your pubs, just yelling at people to pick Doom and like at the trap screen. Damn, that'd be scary stuff, dude.
Yeah, they pick super try. Even I mean, yeah, it's brutal. It's beast here, so it's nice. So I think that's more or less going to do it. Is there anything else you feel we need to mention or that we've forgotten on this show?
I don't know. I think we've kind of touched on everything a little bit scattered, because we kind of brought in the heroes and then we talked about the team performances. But I do want to close out just saying that like eHome getting like 3-0ing EG in a double elim tournament is like they join a very short list of teams who have that accomplishment. Like that should be a freaking plaque. Like you can, like, EG needs to print that out. It's like, hey, you beat EG, you beat PPD in a best of 5 in a grand final double elim, because like, how many people have done that? There's like Team Secret and like I don't know, like Alliance or something. Because
didn't Alliance do it last month?
BO2 dog, BO2. I don't count that. I don't count that. you gotta kill PPD 3 times. Yeah. You gotta kill him 3 times. 2 times doesn't count because could have been a 3-2 series. No, but in all seriousness, like. I mean, we always talk about like eHome or like CDEC as these like teams that are just growing up like crazy, right? And every kind of tournament victory is like, okay, these guys are here or these guys are almost here and stuff. But this is another one of these keystone moments that could be for a team where they can just take it and run with it, because that's what it kind of feels like. Once you get momentum in your sales, like they're gonna go home and be super motivated and know that they can compete with some of the world's best. And now they're just gonna be super zoned in for Shanghai to like. If they repeat like at Shanghai, like how cool would that be, right? Like that would be like the rebirth of China Dodo. After being like smeared in the face by Sumail with like the easy China or whatever. If eHome comes out as like easy Dota 2 major and like Mars TV, that'd be amazing. So yeah, I'm rooting for them.
Yeah, but I mean, at the same time, I feel like it's kind of defending their home turf. I mean, you had a partially European team win in Frankfurt. In this case, again, we talked about this tournament and such. Yeah. Western teams face a lot of disadvantages coming here, just as Chinese teams face certain disadvantages going to TI, for example. And like you're talking about, these teams have to turn around. These Western teams, they go back, like right now, they're back and they're like, just whatever, recuperating, from various life-threatening illnesses. Yeah. And then they have to adjust their like jet lags and stuff, right? But then they're back in like less than 3 weeks. Like they're coming back very soon, so they have to come back and make that adjustment all over again. Hopefully, nobody gets sick this time, and they have to deal with. So I mean, yeah, it's taken with a grain of salt either way. I think certainly the Chinese are hoping and expecting eHome or whoever else to defend their kind of home turf again, but we'll see. It's. Again, as we talked about this event, it's a nice preview. I think it was. There's a lot of good teams here, a lot of interesting Dota, and hopefully we'll get to talk more about this and how teams are getting ready, boot camping and such, for the Shanghai Major next week. So we'll obviously try to get Mr. Bautista from Complexity on with us if we can to talk about maybe their team's Complexity's preparation for this event, and we hope the teams, again, have to deal with all the jet lag and the quick turnaround, that they're all rested up and ready, and that some of the snafus maybe that happened at MDL can be avoided, and we can have ourselves a quality major event. So any final words you have for everybody, Shrew?
No, dude, it's just really, it's good to know that the Skype connection from North America to China kind of held stable throughout the podcast recording, and it's good to have you back onto the show, dude.
Thanks, man. It's great to be back. All right, so without further ado, that's the end of our show here. Defenseofthepatients.com is our website. That's defense with an S, because we are Americans and not British. And you can check us out on iTunes as well to download the show. And on our website, you can click through our banner. You can also help support us as well. And to follow us on the social media network, which I myself do not have access to right now without a VPN from China, it's .p_show. That's DOTP_show for the Defense of the Patients network of shows. I am at KBBQ Dota. My co-host is at WoodShrewDota. And as usual, I think tomorrow is going to be our Theorycraft Thursdays with Ursinity and Proud. And I don't think I missed anything. That's probably the end. Have a good one, ladies and gentlemen, and look forward to seeing you again next week.